we also have someone else who's joined us via Zoom right now who can talk to us a little bit more about this situation. We have Dorothy Njemanze also joining us this morning. Dorothy, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
For those who don't know, Dorothy does a lot of work when it comes to abuse, and especially abuse against women and girls, and protection of women and girls from situations that they may not have a lot of control over. When you saw the story, Dorothy, on the situation with the baby factories, and of course that man of God who has been sentenced right now, according to the statement by NAPTIC. What was the first thought that came to your mind?
Well, for me, anything that shows that the justice system is working, it's a fantastic development for me. Anything that moves the needle towards the direction of support for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, it's a fantastic development, and I'm happy with that. So kudos to NAPTIP. But again, it's a reminder that we're our best support system. NAPTIP does not sit down and get information without proper budgeting for NAPTIP. NAPTIP will not give us the results that we need from NAPTIP. And again, survivor-centered responses. Now we have talked about what happened to perpetrators. The next question is, so what is the situation of survivors? In what condition are they? What kind of social developments is going on to help the survivors that exist, in all the stories across the board. It's a very critical thing. It's not just about accounting for perpetrators. It's balanced when we can account for survivors as well, in these stories.
I mean, it's a very important point that you noted there, and I think that's coming from the fact that you do deal with survivors, so after the conviction, what happens to the people who were involved in this matter? But before we get to that, Dorothy, I want to be able to get your thoughts on baby factories. We saw that very embarrassing documentary from the BBC. So I think it was in December that documentary came out, and in the middle of us, it's called Nigeria's Miracle Babies, and it's a syndrome. Listening to Commissioner of Women Affairs in that documentary, where she was talking about how pervasive this has become, how they have to raid brothels and hotels, and in her state, at least that was in Enugu state, I think, where they actually get these girls and then get them pregnant and then lie to these women in these miracle centers that you're going to have a miracle baby, and then it is a child that has been born in these miracle centers that is given to this thriving business that has been going on for a very long time. It's not the first time we've heard this story, though, Dorothy. What's wrong? Why can't we end this?
Well, simple. The access to justice routes. Justice is very expensive in Nigeria. That's one thing. And so because of how expensive justice is in Nigeria, many perpetrators are capitalizing on the fact that so many people would rather just not deal, whether it is the people directly involved or it is the other people who are neighbors. Sometimes you go and report a situation and it just puts you inside trouble and all of that. So justice is very expensive. And again, the dynamics to the baby factory syndrome in Nigeria. I work with a survivor support center in Abuja, and one thing we have noticed is that the dynamics vary. We can't wait for the manifestation in one way. The elections are coming. Now that the elections are coming, there's another dynamic to this thing. Many perpetrators are targeting children, amongst other things. And, so there are different reasons that people have manufactured to justify their baby factory. Election happens to be one of them that I am aware of. I have seen people who, there are just too many dynamics to it, but my point in all of it is whatever the dynamic that manifests, we should get to a place where the law is supportive of whoever, gives a hint. In fact, the law is proactive because a lot of these things, can be picked up from social media. A lot of these things can be picked up from different aspects. So the laws should be proactive. The law should support people. The law should support witnesses. The law should support survivors. When the laws and the available systems, support survivors and witnesses adequately, more of these things, more of these vices will be better tracked. And as far as it's better tracked, it means that there are higher chances of achieving justice. But for now, all of these are very limited. There's a lot of corruption in a lot of systems, amongst other things. So primarily, we should have proactive systems. We should have honest systems that are willing to receive feedback, so that if there are lapses, you can fix your lapses, just to be able to support humanity. Because what are you existing for as law enforcement, or as a court, or whatever it is, and as an access to justice stakeholder, if you're not supporting humanity, if your systems are not humane, amongst other things, so that you can tell this is the way they're stifling victims, this is the way they're stifling witnesses, because I've given you critical stakeholders who, if they're tampered with, a lot of things will not make the light of the day. The police cases or the NAPTIP cases, law enforcement cases will be messed up. So protection of witnesses, protection of victims, supporting victims to stay alive enough to testify as many times as they are needed. These are critical needs. So do the victims need shelters? Do the witnesses need to relocate from the original places of abode? If they relocate, do they have school fees for their children? Do they have food to eat? All these critical things. We need more humane systems, so that the full details of everything law enforcement needs to thrive, access to justice needs to thrive.
Yes.
Will come up and be utilized by law enforcement to access justice. It's all for the sanity of our environment.
You mentioned two things when it's survival and elections, and how these play a part in this baby factory thing. I'm going to get, you can respond to that much later. But then I think what I want to find out from you is, you talked about the access to justice and how this is an actual problem. But isn't there a cultural aspect to it as well? We heard the former DG of NAPTIP, Dame Julie Oka-Donley, speaking just now. And she said, basically, as long as these cultural restrictions exist, as long as there's stigma against you if you don't have children, where you're forced to always, there's a rule, you must have a child, and you must give birth like the Israelite women for some reason. So other alternatives like surrogacy, these things are not really well accepted in many cultures in the country, and that's in many ways fuels this particular business. What are your thoughts on that? And then your explanation, please, on how elections are affecting baby factories in this country.
All right, great. So the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act and laws exist, but the value of this law is as good as how it affects the lived realities of those who need it. And so the different things that people do to stigmatize women that do not have children, and all sorts of things to put them under pressure, can be tackled using the Violence Against Persons Prohibition laws. But the question is, do people who need to access this have the resources to access the very expensive, access to the very expensive justice in Nigeria? That's where the problem is, because people cannot afford it. Majorly, they'll rather just not deal, and they'll keep making excuses and keep looking for other alternatives, amongst other things. And so that's why I'm very particular about us tightening the access to justice procedures in Nigeria. It's very important. And then how does elections come in? To politicians, many people have value depending on the number of PVCs that you can control. So a lot of people have started recruiting minors. A lot of people have started targeting minors to get them pregnant, amongst other things. And you know that during voters registration, when the sight of a pregnant woman or a woman with a child, gives them priority attention. Many children are going to be positioned in that way. They will go and get registered with the PVCs, amongst other things. These are situations we've been tracking over the years. And that's why when I say that different dynamics to this, I hope that law enforcement will be up and listening and supporting, because it's one thing for you to make an arrest today, it's another thing for you to dedicate the needed resources to prosecute, while you're helping us to protect victims, protect witnesses. Witness protection is a mess currently. Victim protection is a mess currently. So many people just keep saying, you know what, let's leave it to God. You know what, let's leave it to God. If more people got to the place where they could trust that the systems were working enough and not leave it to God, because they know that even if they lose their accommodation because they have, exposed something, if more people got to that state, knowing that the state was going to protect them, then you will see a whole lot more of these things exposed. You will see all the dynamics to baby factory as it exists in Nigeria exposed, and Nigeria will be better for it. Our economy will be better for it. You know, using children to bring in children, or forcing people, or raping people, or abducting people to rape them to ensure that they just keep churning out children is very inhumane. And by all means, we should all be critical stakeholders in ensuring that such practices do not thrive. The only way that can be done for more people to stop the mind your business culture is that the law enforcement systems must work properly, must recognize the support that victims need, and must recognize the support that witnesses need. That support for witnesses, if you keep joking with it, then, I mean, the court cannot manufacture evidence. The court needs evidence from people, and witnesses are critical. You know, victims are critical. So the support to ensure that they stay alive, critical enough to respond to or to provide with evidence to help a case to thrive, is very important. I can't hammer on it too much. You know, so we have harmful normative practices, which by all means clearly should be everybody's business to help the government ensure that they stop thriving. But I can tell you authoritatively, many people will not volunteer information that is right in front of them because they don't want to be criminalized. So protection of witnesses and protection of victims should be highly prioritized, so that if somebody sees where another person is being maltreated because she doesn't have a child, the person will hurriedly report. As long as it looks like it's going to endanger their lives, they'll wish the person well, and, you know, it's business as usual. And these are things that enable perpetrators. These are things that threaten perpetrators. The thought that there's nothing that may happen good for witnesses of.
Dorothy, I'm kind of glad that you clarified you know, the issue with the baby factory and how the link with the elections. I want to say I'm glad it's nothing darker than what you had, you know, explained, because my mind was traveling elsewhere. I was beginning to think, I mean, do we still have this thinking that rituals are involved around elections, and could that be the reason?
Absolutely, that's just another dynamic to it.
Okay.
That's just a dynamic to it. But the critical part is the mass recruitment of children, adolescents, to produce babies, to make them look like adults, so that the people who are doing this have more PVCs and they look valuable to politicians. That's the critical part.
Okay, so now that we know that there is that, because it's dark, it's still equally dark, because these women are going to have these girls are going to have the babies at the end of the day, and somebody has to look after those children, and oftentimes those girls are in no position to look after those children. But, you know, let's talk about the dynamics that was involved, because you talked about witness protection and how important it is, and how there has to be support for victims, which is the section in which you have played for many years now. I'm looking at this particular story that has to do with the bishop. Let's not forget that he is supposed to be a man of God. I mean, a man of the cloth, whom we usually have a lot of respect for in this country. And now he's bagged 20 years without the option of a fine. I'm just wondering, what dynamics do you think were at play for this man to have been, for justice to have been served in the manner that it has been served? Because let's not forget, this young girl was placed in the care of his family. It meant that, you know, his family too members of his family might have had to give witness, you know, in this particular instance, to make sure that justice was served. It would mean that they too would have had to, you know, live with the fact that they're not going to have a father, assuming he were convicted, and now he has been convicted. So what dynamics could have been at play, and what sacrifices do you think people would have had to make for this conviction to have been possible?
The biggest sacrifice that was made was that the truth was told. Now, one of the things that people use to blackmail others from telling the truth is, remember, you know, forgive your neighbor, forgive as Christ forgave, all those different, using religion to blackmail other people. And in this case, the person is a religious figure to some people. And so there'll be that part of fighting with your conscience to say, God, am I offending you by outing the man of God? You know, amongst other things, the different dynamics to this. Now, it's important to remember that people of faith or people of religion are human beings as well. And a lot of people who are perpetrators of evil can take the form of people of faith or people of religion to perpetrate the violence. So when we go to our religious places, let's go with our heads and our hearts. If something doesn't feel right, if something feels off, if somebody complains of something, please think it twice again and say, look, why is this person saying this? Get the person to a professional. The critical things must have been done. There is the possibility that the presence of religion confuses a lot of people. But please, if you lean towards religion in any way, this is a clarion call to say, when somebody voices something, or when you see something, it's important to say something so that you can double check it to make sure that you're not enabling somebody, to be in more danger. Many people just keep quiet, especially with people of religion, because they just don't want to get in trouble. And that's where the witness protection comes in handy. That's the link to the witness protection. I heard this, or I saw this, or I think I saw this, or I suppose I saw this, amongst other things. So we should develop systems that encourage more people to participate in volunteering what they saw, they could have heard, and everything, without any fear of repercussions, just because they are witnesses or they could have been witnesses. These things kill people every day, and nobody wants to lose their lives carelessly.
I'm also looking at the dynamics of the family. There's a very famous case that happened in Lagos, where a medical practitioner, his wife was the one who reported him. I am sure you must have, you know that particular case. And
absolutely,
how much of an uproar there was in Lagos, and the woman recounting her experience. Right now, the appeal court has, quashed the conviction which the lower court had given. And, even though it's unclear if the Lagos state government, and there's been no statement made so far by the Lagos, that I have seen, by the Lagos state government as to whether or not they're going to be appealing the judgment as given by the Court of Appeal, because it does raise fundamental questions as to what precisely could have gone wrong in the lower court for the conviction to have been quashed entirely. I'm just a little curious, the family dynamics that is involved when family members, especially heads of families, are involved in this. Do you think that we've sufficiently understood and we've sufficiently made provisions for people who really have the intention or, but lack the courage in some instances because they fear the repercussions for coming forward, maybe to oust a very important member of the family who also has a good standing, in the eyes of society?
Well, this again comes to the perception of the integrity of the courts, the perception of the integrity of the law enforcement systems, the perception of the integrity of the medical systems that test people and help gather corroborative scientific evidence, the integrity of the access to justice system, the perception of the integrity of the access to justice system. This is where it comes to play. Because if so many people feel, well, because of what I have seen in this case, or in this other case that is out there, what are my chances? Then chances that they would even support in the ways they should support are dwindling. For what it's worth, powerful people, there's a lot of power dynamics. There are levels to power dynamics in everything, that has to do with access to justice. And the more powerful the person is, the more difficult it may be for the justice to come. But it's important for success stories to be shared far and wide so that, people know that, look, it is possible for justice to happen. It is possible for the right thing to happen. You may have heard a lot of things negatively, but it is possible. And it is only possible if everybody sees themselves as a critical stakeholder, whether you are the mother of the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator, whether you are the brother, whether you're the wife, whether you're the husband, whether you're the child, humanity first at the end of the day. And let's work on it with strengthened law enforcement systems just for the good of everybody. So if that mentality is spread across and everybody understands it, then more people will jump on board. Getting family to come on board could be tricky, especially if the systems are perceived to be corrupt. So the perception of the integrity of all stakeholders in the law enforcement, in the access to justice system, is very important. So the reforms we've been calling for, that impact the integrity. Now is the time to do critical rethinking of how these things impact. And so with success stories like this, now is another time to say, oh, if these things were not in place, or if certain things were in place, we would have higher conviction rates. And it's not just about the higher conviction rates. What is the situation of the survivors? in this case. The survivors could be witnesses, the survivors could be the victims, So what is the situation? And we should have holistic approach towards the response to them. The Ministry of Humanitarian, the Humanitarian Ministry, the Ministry of Women's Affairs, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education. It's a multi-sector collaboration thing. Ministry of Interior. Everybody has a role to play. Don't move it to just one person. So we should think critically about the roles each person can play and let everybody play to have strengthened systems. Without strengthened systems, a lot of appendages that would uphold systems that would make more people to support victims of violence will just keep crumbling.
Let me ask you this. In this baby factory, let me switch gears now to the baby factory. I'm looking at some of the visuals of the girls whom have been paraded, and you have to ask: are they seen as the perpetrators, or they're seen as victims? I mean, are they survivors? Because some people will say these young girls, are they old enough to even know what it is that they're doing and the implications of what it is that they're doing? Do you think that they should be paraded? Are they seen as co-conspirators? What precisely, how are they regarded, and how do you think they should be regarded?
Well, the people who are used as carriers many times don't have a choice. In some cases, we've had where people are paid, for the services. In other places, they're abducted and kept in a place, and they're just, used to produce babies. Once they deliver a baby, the baby is taken away from them, and people start raping them again just to get them to get pregnant, amongst things. So they definitely are survivors. However, while people may make a case against the parades, that could also be the dynamic of, maybe you would see your relative and there would be a form of reconciliation, and there would be a form of, an opportunity to reconcile people, and that would feed into the reintegration process, So if it looks to them like it's gloomy, maybe that would make excuses for the so-called parading. Sometimes the parading has multiple dynamics to it. That's the thing. It's also to show people the range of people who are affected, to draw needed support. These are the dynamics of our present day reality, but we don't need to get to that point. That's why I'm advocating very strongly, in clear terms, for systems that support survivors. If we had systems that support survivors, people would not feel the need to parade, or if you parade, there are dynamics to it. As long as they are minors, you don't show their faces, amongst other things. There are dynamics. Even if they're not minors, if the person does not want the face shown, you don't show the face. And the reasons why they don't want the face shown, amongst other things. So we need to go back to holistic systems. And the best way to develop holistic systems is to ensure that we, survivors of violence, are critical stakeholders in every situation that's in every step to refine or reform the access to justice processes. We just need to ensure that they are humane. Somebody who is in a baby factory situation may have seen people paraded that way, and that would be the reason why the person would not escalate. Or that, the person just wants to preserve her own identity.
I mean, Dorothy, it is an ongoing conversation, because I know many people who, the stigma on,
That's it.
The stigma is one of the biggest issues. But how do you measure stigma against some of the other dynamics that you've mentioned right now?
Exactly.
Because you might need help, your family might be able to notice where you are. But it's an ongoing conversation. I wanted to be able to take you up on some of the loopholes with and I like to call people's names. And I don't care who's upset about it. The Bishop Kenneth Duke, that's the name of the man that was sentenced yesterday. And of course, it was interesting because we saw that it was our laws working. He was the judgment. He was found guilty of a one-count charge of rape and was sentenced accordingly without an option of fine. At least that's what NAPTIP told us. And just so we can understand where this Bishop Kenneth Duke was doing his business. The church was at Dantata Zuba Expressway, after the service, of course, all the dynamics that came in was a guardianship situation, though he was supposed to be a guardian to this woman's child. So those are some of the issues. The guardianship bits, where we entrust people with our children because of whatever economic situation that we're facing right now. And then for the baby factory, these girls were recruited online, according to the statement from NAPTIP. What kind of so it was an actual recruitment process. It was online. You go and apply, and then they bring you and you get pregnant, and you know that you're going to give your child away. It brings up the question of our surrogacy laws in Nigeria and why people don't, what's the problem? Why not? Because that's, if you're going to do it the legal way, it's basically the same thing legally, isn't it? It's just that it is more organized. There are more rights being protected. Why all the shifting around? Why do we have that particular loophole when it comes to our surrogacy laws in Nigeria? And then finally, the baby factories in an estate somewhere in Ushafa, here in the FCT. I like to call places by names. And it was a tip-off from somebody in the neighborhood. Talk to us a little bit about these dynamics and what can be done going forward.
So when you mentioned here about how the baby factory thing, the people were recruited online, something, I have goosebumps on my body now. Because we're still following up with law enforcement on a lot of children that were reported missing by their family members who got online offers for jobs, and they honored the online offers for jobs, and they got to the place and never were seen by their families again. So now my head is asking me, could that be the kind of recruitment that was done? Because when you come to surrogacy laws, it is one thing for somebody to willingly participate in something, and it's another thing for somebody to be coerced into participating in something because the person has been lured into a place where the person has been abducted or kidnapped, amongst other things. And these are dynamics. And so we need to be clear on which of the dynamics it is that this one falls under. But whichever one it is, our law enforcement agencies, up and doing about it. Towards the end of last year, we had so many of these kinds of reports from family members. My office referred several to NAPTIP specifically, because, and then one thing we had a big problem with is declaring on Interpol platform that people had been abducted. There are particular places in Abuja here where food is sold, and people just go there to lure people and say, you want job? Okay, go to so and so place. That's how it starts. It's you want job, and many of them is not you want baby. That's the truth. So if that is the situation, if that's the dynamic, is our law enforcement on top of the issue? And then if you need to declare somebody, some of these people are taken across the borders. They're not kept in Nigeria. So if that is the situation, do we have good access to put out word and have Interpol on the matter, as soon as these things are reported? It's just a lot of things, but by and large, law enforcement needs to stop seeing those of us that are on the field with them as competition or as a problem. We're partners in progress. We have the trust of community members, and we can give good directions. We are there. Our progress is the progress of the nation. And
Dorothy, I've seen you do quite a lot of work in this regard. I want to be able to get you to talk about guardianship. At least we talked about the loophole with surrogacy laws. When it comes to guardianship, we have a very strange tradition in this country. if I'm unable to take care of my child, I give it to my uncle.
The house help thing.
But they don't want, no, let's not call them house helps. It's my sister's child. She's staying with us for a while. Know. But subjected to all kinds of abuse. And we see this happen all over the country. We see it's recurring. Even though now it's a little different. There's a case that we saw a few days ago where it was the girl that was in the shop and she was being beaten by her madam, and people filmed it and they put it online. So yes, the reporting system has become a little bit better. But my question has to do with the concept of guardianship. How can it be better regulated in this country? Is that something your office looks into as well? Because if I cannot take care of, if someone can take care of the child and there's someone else who can, that particular thing
makes sense.
It makes sense. But how do you ensure that it's done properly and that these children are protected?
I hear you. I hear you. The last time my office responded to a case that had guardianship issues as the, at the bane of it was last night by 10 p.m. last night. We got a distress call that a girl was outside and looking desperately to run away because she didn't like where she had been taken to work. The thing about it is this house help system, the house help system, if you say it is on premise of love, that you're taking in somebody's child, okay, so just come and stay with me, I'll pay your school fees. Of course you would help out a little bit, but I would sort you out, I'll take care of you. Then the love must not be seen to be lost. Love does not hurt, love does not harm. There's a culture shock so many times for these people who gravitate to the cities, for a better life. And so you must be willing to take them through the process. You must be willing to go through the process in humane ways. Once inhumanity creeps in, then that is where the person has, gone foul of the law. And who do we depend on to save the person who is at the mercy? It's the neighbors who hear the sounds. It's everybody. And that's why I commend a state like Lagos State that has a mandatory reporting policy. We need more states to have mandatory reporting policies. And then when mandatory reporting is done, we don't want people to say, okay, we have heard you. Can you bring the person to us? No, please, as much as possible, let law enforcement be strengthened to get on it by themselves and ensure that, witnesses are protected, victims are protected. So far, NAPTIP is doing a lot of good. The police has done some good as well. But we need to up the ante. The good we are doing in comparison with the bad that is being done is, there's still a lot of room for improvement. And the best way to achieve this improvement is by strengthening processes. Now, in such situations, you don't just go to attack the perpetrators. My question still always remains, what becomes of the survivor? Yesterday, because DNF has a shelter, DNF was able to give shelter to this child who was stranded because of the inhumane treatment the child complained of. In fact, she complained of an attempted rape. And because they tried to rape her here, they just moved her to the next location. And the first thing they did when they moved her was they seized her phone. For the fact they seized her phone, it means that they mean she should not communicate, she shouldn't complain, she should bear whatever it is. Any system, whether you're installing CCTV in the bathrooms of the house helps or whatever it is, because there are different dynamics to all of this, any system that subjects helps to inhumane treatments, torture, or degrading treatments, it's unfair, and the law should jump in to protect these people. But is the law strengthened enough to locate these people? The best way the law can locate them is through witnesses. If witnesses speak up, in fact, till today, there was a case that we were following up since end of 2023, that the witnesses have not found protection. So until witness protection and survivor protection, including strengthening of shelters, supporting of existing shelters, to continue providing support and expansion of the shelter system, happens effectively, we're just going to be moving around chasing our tails in circles. That's what it looks like. There are systems on ground that are supporting law enforcement, but they do need to be strengthened. Yesterday night, when this case was reported to us, we didn't have a vehicle to use and go and rescue her. And in collaboration, in talks with NAPTIP, at the time it was, okay, DNF, can you keep her in the shelter and bring her to the office this morning? That is what collaboration looks like. That is how it works. And so this morning, she's going to be in NAPTIP office, and hopefully, justice will be served. Then the feedback system when we take cases to law enforcement, how good is it? It needs to improve, because the delay, whenever there's delay, sometimes it just makes people to lose hope. And then when they lose hope, the first thing so many people think about is, maybe the case is turning, maybe they'll soon turn it against me. Let me disappear from my life. And that is how, strong evidence dissipates instead of builds up for the good of the victims. So it's still a clarion call. We need to strengthen our systems. Guardianship is fine. Help your neighbors, support your neighbors. That's fantastic. But how, if something is happening that makes the person uncomfortable, does the person have an option to speak up? If the person has an option to speak up, is there an option to not hold the person to ransom for speaking up, or not punish the person for speaking up. If those things are not there, then the person is planning an abusive situation, and the law enforcement should come in immediately and take up action.
How much progress would you say that we have made since we domesticated the VAP Act? Has it really made, how much of a difference would you say it has made?
Oh, it has made a lot of, it has impacted a lot of lives. It definitely has impacted a lot of lives. But the fact that witness protection, protection orders are difficult to come by. I have never successfully, seen a protection order granted. The long time it takes to process cases, the fact that a lot of people are in so many law enforcement offices because of the salaries they need to earn, and not because they are passionate about the thing. So if a survivor should ask a basic question, you hear things like, I beg, you want to abi, you no want to. No, we're supposed to educate people on the rights, on legal provisions and legal procedures, because many people who need these laws do not know legal provisions and legal procedures. Okay, so if we have more dedicated people in the law enforcement offices, not just people who want to earn a salary, because we need to have our law enforcement responsive round the clock. And where law enforcement is not responsive round the clock, or able to be responsive round the clock, there are those of us on ground that can support law enforcement for the few hours that they want to close. But it's a mess if we just keeping quiet and assuming that things are not happening. Now we've got to the issue of the VAP repeal. Should VAP be repealed? Should it be amended? All those conversations cannot happen effectively if our lived realities, and when I say our lived realities, victims, right, it's violence against persons. So the people who have experienced violence, how have the systems interplayed to make us happy or not happy? What is it? What exists? Our lived realities are the true test of whether or not anything is working. The VAP Act is fine. The VAP laws are fine, but implementation is very low. And implementation is low because budgeting is budgeting has not gotten to the place where the different aspects of the VAP that can impact people positively are captured in budget. So until that happens, and that happens effectively and as soon as possible, VAP would just be something people would hear about and not necessarily experience. So now that a lot is happening around budgeting, please, everybody should look into how the VAP laws, are captured, or the provisions of the VAP laws are captured in the budget.
It's interesting you make reference to the budget, because we've been saying government, ministries, departments, and agencies at the National Assembly defending their budgets and asking why, saying why they should get some more. Interestingly, though, we haven't seen NAPTIP. I don't know when they eventually made their own budget defense. But over the years, given what you know of the sector, would you say that increasingly, we have been able to put our money where our mouth is with regards to helping to fight the prohibition of trafficking in persons?
Absolutely, yes. Increasingly, we are doing that, but compared to where we should be, there's absolute room for growth. I mentioned yesterday that a victim of trafficking. In fact, how did you come to Abuja? She said her friend brought her. How did you get to the place where you are that your phone was seized? This is a minor. So the only thing that comes to play, if she will get help, she will get help from somebody who has power. And who has the power? It is law enforcement. So if law enforcement is not able to get to her at that time, the placement in a shelter is important. How are we shelter surviving? Our shelter, for instance, is at the verge of the building is about to be repurposed, and we are looking desperately for how to get support to return another building. It's difficult. People don't want to give us the buildings because they say, before you know it, we'd rather a family to come and all these things. We're not getting the support from government. We're not getting the food that, we're not getting food. We're not getting sanitary pads. We're not getting diapers. We're not getting waivers for medical bills. We're not getting a lot of things. So if the systems that exist to support survivors are not functioning, then who is picking up? Sometimes some people just come to us, and when they get the very basic, they say, don't worry. I know say if I reach the other place, I'm talking law enforcement now and other things. If you just, it not go work for me. You don't try for me. At least I don't go hospital. All those kind of things. I know they're under. You don't give me money. You don't give me. We don't start business. We don't do this. There are different things different survivors want. If we don't invest in survivor support and victim support and witness support, there's a lot that is just going to continue having a field day. A lot of perpetrators will continue having a field day, and that's the truth.
Well, Dorothy, we have to thank you so much for your intervention on this particular issue this morning. Dorothy Njemanze is a development expert and filmmaker. She also runs a shelter here in Abuja for victims of violence against persons. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much, Maupe, and take care. Have a nice day.
Well, switching gears now to business, and Laddie Williams is on standby to bring us Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. Please stay with us.